Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Blue is the New White podcast. Our guest today is an excellent entrepreneur and an excellent coach. His name is Mick Carbo with Carbo Coaching. He helps blue-collar businesses increase productivity and profitability with leadership training. Mick shares his incredible journey that starts off shortly after high school. Immediately jumping in to having a family and starting a business, Mick thought he knew it all, right up until he didn't. He never had the kind of guidance or support he needed to properly run his flooring business and ended up losing it all and having to start over, with less of an ego this time. Mick is using his expertise and his life experiences to make sure others don't fall into the same trap. He has incredible insights in the next generation of blue-collar workers, the modern-day culture of the skilled trades, and how the right leadership can support both. So put on those headphones and get ready to be inspired. And remember, we don't monetize this show. We don't run ads. Just pure information and success stories from skilled tradespeople and skilled trades advocates from all over. So if you find value in this show or in this episode, please take a moment to rate it, review it, share it. It would be much appreciated. And that's how we spread the word about the blue-collar world. So, that said, thank you for listening and enjoy this episode with Mick Carbo. Welcome to another episode of Blue is the New White podcast. I've got an awesome guest here for you today. His name is Mick Carbo. Mick, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Thanks, Josh. I really appreciate you having me on the show. I guess I have quite a story. It's a little bit unconventional, different from most, but I think it's fun and adventurous. So here we go. Basically, when I was a kid, I knew I wanted three things. I wanted to be married, I wanted to have kids, and I wanted to own my own business. I don't know where I came up with all those things, but nevertheless, that's what I wanted. And in retrospect, it probably wasn't the best or smartest thing to do all three of those things right after graduating high school, but that's what happened. So here we are. I married my high school sweetheart about 3 months after graduating high school. We had our first kid a year later, and then after we had one every 2 years, and then we figured out how that was happening, and we should probably hold it back a little bit. But I've always been very entrepreneurial, had some big goals and dreams and plans with some friends of mine from high school. And I got into the tile trade, the flooring trade, installing ceramic tile and marble right after high school to learn the trade and ultimately start my own business there because I thought it would fuel my other passions. And it really did. I had that business for 8 years, and it was great. I loved it. I loved the work. I loved doing work with my hands and creating beautiful things that my customers enjoyed. But I was kind of arrogant back then, as some, maybe not every 18-year-old, but some 18-year-olds, And I figured I could do everything on my own, and that I really wanted to prove myself and have everybody know that I could make it, right? And so therefore, I didn't really ask anybody for any help. And after a while, I couldn't hold it down all on my own, man. And I was looking around one day, and the electric company actually shut off our electricity. And my first son was a little over a year old, so he's playing around on the floor with his toys, and I felt pretty crappy about that, as you might imagine, and said to myself, this is never going to happen again. So I picked up the phone and actually started selling weed. And I did that at first just to supplement my, income from my tile business and make a couple $100 extra a month to keep the lights on. But me being sort of the entrepreneurial guy that I am, it spiraled into somewhat of an empire over the course of a couple of years. And when you're doing that sort of thing, only one of a couple of options happens, and the inevitable happened to me. And I got arrested at the end of 2007 and actually have a felony conviction now. So the reason I share that is because that happening in my life had me lose my tile business because I was doing a lot of subcontracting work through Home Depot, and you have to pass a background check to go into people's homes. So I couldn't do that work anymore. So I lost everything that I had, all of my income, lost my house, had to move my wife and 3 kids at that point into my mother's basement, and had to live there for a few years getting back on our feet. And in retrospect, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It caused me to have to be vulnerable and to ask for help and to really understand that I couldn't do it all on my own, and that, I needed support structures in my life to help me grow and propel and have the life that I want. So I share that because our mission right now is really to help every blue collar worker to have a fulfilling, healthy, happy experience of life, both in and outside of work. And my theory is that people have to be willing to be vulnerable and ask for the help that they need in order to create that scenario. So that's who we are. That's what we're doing in the work that we're doing through my coaching business, and what kind of got me to where I am today. I started, back then, learning everything that I could, reading, listening, getting supportive coaches and mentors in my life. And I'm here to kind of spread the message that level of support is available, and it's possible to really have that experience.
Wow. That is an incredible story, and I applaud you for telling it. You're the first person to come on the podcast and openly admit that he slung weed, in a prior life. And but I see how it was very pivotal to the story that you told, because honestly, I think that there's a lot of people out there that are probably in that same boat now. Whether it be selling weed or whether it be just in a place of confusion and desperation, if you will, because they don't know what direction to go, and like you said, it is a common trait for younger people, 18 to 25, to be very arrogant. I was, when I got out of high school, you think you know everything, right? You got a car that goes fast, and now you're king of the world, and
Yep.
And it gets people in trouble, and the lucky ones get through it and come to the realization that they don't know it all without having to face a major downfall or a major decision of any kind. They just outgrow it. But then I think a good chunk of them do end up making poor decisions, and that could affect the rest of their life. And with a support system, a proper support system like the one that you're offering, I think they could be pointed in the right direction a lot sooner. And I know that if I was pointed in the right direction a lot sooner, I'd be leaps and bounds of where I am today, ahead of where I am today. So I definitely see the value in what you offer. So I'm curious, when you say that you offer this kind of support to blue collar workers, I'm assuming you mean mental and well-being, and performance coaching, stuff like that. And do you do that through businesses, or do you do that one-on-one with blue collar workers?
We're doing it through businesses right now. My vision is that the work that we do eventually touches every blue collar worker. And I don't pretend to say that, my company is going to be the voice that makes that difference for everybody. We're looking to create partnerships with amazing people like you, who are also looking to support people in the blue collar professions, right? And there is lots of people like us who really want to make a difference, and we're interested in building a network of people who want to collaborate and partner around making that difference and not be competitors, if you will. But the program that we offer is really a leadership program that that improves relationships, that increases productivity and impacts the bottom line, right? So we're partnering with companies at first and working with the business owner, key people in the organization, other leaders. But part of that program touches as many people as we can. It depends on how large the company is and all of that, but it has a component that is more facilitation and training. And it also has a component that is more of a coaching piece, right? So the coaching usually is at this point reserved for the people in higher levels of leadership, because they're going to go and be the ones on the ground mostly impacting the workers out in the field, right? So the theory is, if we can support the leadership and coach them up and train them around being able to make a bigger difference in the health and the well-being of their workers, then they can continue doing this work long after we've left, if that makes sense. And then additionally, we're also launching a podcast actually in the next few weeks, where we're going to be putting out content to sort of develop this idea with the people out in the workforce, the people out in the field, to be able to listen to stories from leaders, stories that are similar to mine. We're calling the podcast "Tragedy to Triumph," and it's going to be really stories about people in leadership positions that had to go through hell, like really had to confront their worst nightmares and their inner demons, and that forced them to be vulnerable, and this is intended to inspire people to be willing to talk about the things that they're currently unwilling to talk about, that's really blocking them from getting that support that they need and from addressing some of those things that are really impacting their well-being and their happiness.
Wow. No, that's really cool. So you're in these blue collar businesses and you're helping these leaders in their leadership practices and stuff like that. So I imagine you see all types of different cultures out there in the blue collar world. And it sounds like that's one of the things that you're trying to help develop is the company culture. So I'm curious to get your opinion. We talk a lot about the skills gap, right? We all know that there's more people retiring from this industry than entering into it. What do you think and what do you see in the cultures that you've been in and around as, maybe the biggest obstacle that blue collar companies have in attracting this young talent? Do you think it's a culture issue, or do you think it's something else, a skewed perception of what actually goes on?
I think it's both. I don't think it's either one. I think it's both. I don't think that young people especially, understand what's available in the trades and in blue collar spaces. And there's a perception of what is going on, and this is a huge thing that we've seen. I mean, there's a very high level of ego, right? And it's also generational. I think the way that I would describe the culture overall, and I want to be really clear, like there's a lot of really great leadership out there, and there's a lot of really great cultures, and I've talked to lots of people. As a matter of fact, I love getting advice from folks like that about how they have built the successful and strong and kind of inclusive cultures that they have. And I've also seen some really, really horrible stuff, like some really real horror stories. And what I think is happening in those scenarios is that there's like this sort of macho kind of culture happening where the folks are coming from this place of if you get hurt, rub some dirt in it and get back out there and
tape an aspirin to it.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not feeling up to the job, then you're a sissy or worse, right? If you have some feelings that are in the way, if you have problems at home with your spouse, if you have problems at home with, your kids, if you're feeling sad and depressed, if you're feeling anxious, you keep your mouth shut and you keep your feelings to yourself and you don't talk about that stuff. You come here to work and that's it. And that, the perception, I think, is that, people are looked at less as people and more as a resource, if that makes sense. So, that's why I really love the concept of vulnerability, and empathy from leadership, where we realize that people are our most important asset. Our team is our most important asset. And they need to be treated like human beings, that folks have feelings, they have dreams and goals, they have fears, like deeply seated fears about their security, about their ability to provide for their families, and stuff in the way of them really feeling joyful and grateful and happy. And that as leaders, again, we ought to remember these things, and we ought to really dig in and find out how we can support people to have a greater experience of life. And it just so happens that when we do, people are happier, people are healthier, they have a stronger sense of well-being, and they become more productive. And I think that we can't do this so as to become more productive and so as to boost the bottom line. Because I think that the workforce can sniff that out, a mile away. But if we really get clear on and be genuine about the desire to help people, those other things will come, and it'll be a win-win-win for everybody. Happier customers, happier workers, and bigger bank accounts for companies.
Yeah, no, that was very well said. And I can definitely, you paint a good picture, when you describe things like that, because, I think you're right. I've seen it in the industry, and I think the cultures that we see, and I could be way off base, and you would probably know better than me on this, but I would assume, because I've been in, the blue collar industry now for about, what year is it? So probably for about 12 years, 12 or 13 years. So my assumption, and this is just my assumption, and it could be a result of the perceptions that exist today, but I assume that once upon a time, the culture that you're describing, the kind of brass knuckles, stuff your feelings down into your stomach and go to work kind of culture was probably more the norm back in the day. And when I say back in the day, I mean, 60s, 70s, maybe even into the 80s. And now that the companies that we're seeing today with different cultures are a result of change. And so do you think that as far as when young people decide whether or not they want to enter into this trade, they still have that idea that maybe the majority of the cultures out there are like that, and that could be a deterrent in their decision of whether or not to go into blue collar work? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons for different people, but you think that one exists?
I think it does. I think it does. These young people have family members. Everybody knows somebody that works in a blue collar field. Somebody who works in the trade, somebody who works for a construction company, somebody who's a mechanic, car mechanic or whatever. Everybody knows somebody like that. They have family members, they have friends, and I think they hear stories, and they see that stuff happening on the shows that they watch, the movies that they watch, and I think it's more pervasive than we think.
Yeah. And like I said, that was just an assumption on my part. I was blessed to come into this company and have a real impact on the culture here, and in what I do, and one of the things, I mean, what you're saying really resonates with me because, I try to implement that whenever possible. I mean, there's a line, right? There's a line that every business owner, every CEO, everybody in a leadership position has to walk. We can't, we can't placate to everybody at all times. And there is a line, right? There's a personal responsibility that people have when they go to work, but I think it's about how we communicate that. And it sounds like maybe that's part of what you teach is how to properly communicate that. So instead of saying, hey, tape an aspirin to it, get back to work, maybe taking a different approach. So, what are some tactics that you, if you don't mind sharing, what are some tactics that you suggest to people in blue collar leadership to kind of change this mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's two really main facets of coaching, I think, if you were to chunk everything down into two categories. One is what we call facilitative coaching, which is what most coaches are doing out there, hopefully all of them on some level, where you're helping a client set goals and create plans and milestones, right? And having some accountability along the way. And then there's this other piece that we call ontological coaching. And that's a mouthful, but ontology is the study of being, and specifically the study of being human. Okay. So communication is part of that being conversation, to your point. But communication has a lot of different forms. There's verbal and nonverbal communication, so there's a perception, I think, sometimes of being unapproachable by certain leaders or people in leadership positions. One of the things we're constantly looking at with the companies that we're working with are, do you have managers or do you have leaders? There's a difference, manager is a title, leadership is a way of being. So what we're looking at with a lot of people is kind of training and developing that other side of management, which is being a great leader versus, being a supervisor and looking over somebody's shoulder to, make sure they're doing their job or to push them in that direction. So I think it's being approachable. It's learning how to speak with care and empathy. It's being willing to be wrong, to be focused on the relationship with the people that you're working with more so than being right. There's check-ins, like actually asking people, do you have what you need? Do you have what you need to do a good job? Do you have the know-how? Is there any gaps in the training that I've been providing you? And always that willingness to be vulnerable, to share, hey, I've been there, to really get on those people's team, I like to say, make sure that people know that you're on the same team with them and that they can come to you with anything and that you're willing to hear them out, to support them, and to also share about your downfalls. Like, leader doesn't mean I know everything. Leadership is in essence kind of striking out into the unknown, right? Like going into the land of uncertainty and creating something new or creating our own path, right? So inevitably on the path of leadership, we stumble and fall, we make mistakes, we say things we shouldn't. And I believe that we should own that in positions of leadership. And we should, again, be vulnerable and share when we made a mistake. And that just makes all the difference.
Yeah. No, I would imagine all that stuff that you're saying really resonates with me, especially since, I didn't really have, when I was coming up in the industry, I started off as a technician. I worked my way up, and now obviously CEO of this company. And, I had my dad. My dad started the company, and it was him and I working side by side when we first started. But he'll be the first to tell you he's a technician. He's not a businessman. And as far as managing people, neither one of us were experienced in that. So all these things that you're talking about are things that I had to learn along the way. Like you said, making mistakes. And what really resonated with me is the not being approachable aspect of things, because that, I think, creeps up on people, because people, they understand and they know what you're saying right now is the way to be, right? To practice empathy and to make sure you communicate and to set goals and, to honestly, just in short, to care about the people that you have working for you, but, in a leadership position, most people have things thrown at them left and right? They're trying to juggle 18 different things at one time. And as approachable as they want to be, they give off these micro messages, right? When people try to approach them, like unwittingly, like when somebody comes into my office, it's something that I've recently become more aware of. But if I'm in the middle of doing something and I have an open door policy, somebody comes in, I want to listen to them. I want to hear what they have to say, but maybe my eyes glance over to my phone or my computer, one too many times while they're talking. Little things like that, if leaders aren't aware of, makes them not approachable. And that goes into the nonverbal aspect of what you're talking about, right? So, I think awareness is a big thing, because again, you may not realize you're doing it. You're just trying to get shit done, And
so good, man. Yeah, so good.
Yeah. And, so one of the ways that I've found to combat that, and then the other aspect of that is sometimes, even after you recognize that and you are considered approachable by most standards, sometimes depending on your title, you may just not be approachable because people don't know you well enough, And so I try to put out anonymous surveys, once every quarter or so, and give people the opportunity to say what needs to be said without putting their name to it, And then if it's something good and it's something that needs to be recognized, usually I can call out the statement or whatever it was on our communication platform and say, hey, if you want recognition for this, it was a great fucking idea. So, tell me who you are and you got it, but I won't do that for the ideas that, maybe aren't so good, or obviously the statements that aren't so good that people need to say sometimes. But I think that that's one way to combat, not being approachable, but definitely being aware of that micro messaging. Is that something that you see quite a bit?
All the time, man. Every single day.
Yeah.
And like you said, the awareness is key. One of the things that I like to say about coaching and us as coaches is that we are a mirror to our clients. It's our job to really just reflect back to people the things that they don't see. Like, why do we have rear view mirrors in our car? Well, that's where we get to see our blind spots, so we don't run into the car next to us when we're trying to change lanes. It's the same thing in human nature. These things become habitual and completely unconscious. So we're here to reflect those things back so that the client really gets their impact, because every leader has impact. I like to say every leader leaves a wake, right? Like the wake from a boat. And that's either going to cause a positive sort of ripple effect, or it's going to cause something negative or something that the business doesn't actually want to exist there. And it's a leader's responsibility to become aware of those things, in my opinion, and to take a look at if there's anything that needs to shift.
Yeah, and I really love that analogy. That's a really great way to put it, leaving a wake, and it could be positive or negative. That's I think that's a great visualization, for those out there listening. So, there's a word that you've been using a couple of times now since we've started, and that's vulnerability. And I'm a big proponent of that. I've read Brene Brown's books, and and stuff
Oh,
like
nice.
that, on vulnerability. And I think that there's definitely value in that. And that goes hand in hand with failure, right? And I'm a big advocate for failing, and you being a coach and a leadership coach and what you do, you understand what I'm saying when I say that I embrace failure because, my dad taught me at a very young age. He said, because I spent a good chunk of my life in Hollywood, in the movie business. And he would always tell me, he said, success rate is 100% as long as you don't give up. So basically what he was saying is fail as many times as you need to fail, but stand back up and keep pressing forward. And eventually you'll learn enough to do what you set out to do. And I think the other part of that is the vulnerability, being able to admit that, yeah, you failed. Yeah, you made a mistake, but you're going to make you better. Am I on the right track there?
Oh man, so much. Like that's really great. Actually, I say something similar. I like to tell people the only way that they'll fail is if they quit. So very, very, very similar. And yeah, I mean, vulnerability is such a big conversation, but it has so much to do with failure, just like you're talking about. I think that another thing that folks say, and that I like to say to people, is that if you want to be good at something, you've got to be willing to be bad at it first. Yeah. And that's really, really a vulnerable thing, right? Like the Michael Jordan quote that's all over the place is, he made more shots than anybody else because he was willing to risk more, game-winning shots than anybody else, right? And that's I think what makes great people and great leaders and what makes anybody successful. And this term that we're using, leadership, also doesn't necessarily mean, like I said before, it's not a position, it's a way of being. It's there's an opportunity for every person at every level to be a leader, and I think a great leader inside of a company is going to create the space for their people to understand that and get that, and to help them come up as a leader so that they can, develop and help develop the organization too. But man, yeah, to me, vulnerability is everything. The ability to fail, the ability to share what our shortcomings are, the ability to say, hey, I don't got this today. Like I need something, and it's only going to be okay for the people on our team if it's okay for us as the leader.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I like your be bad first statement there. You have to be willing to be bad at something before you get good at it. I mean, look at kids, right? Kids are terrible at everything when they first try. I mean, it's just the truth, right? They haven't learned how to do it, but they're never deterred. It's like they don't have that switch that allows them to be vulnerable. They're just perpetually vulnerable.
Exactly.
Right? And
yeah, you never see a kid, a toddler who stands up for the first time they're trying to work and falls on his ass, get upset about that. Like right. He just laughs it off and gets back up and tries it again.
Yep.
But you're right. Like that. It puts us in a position where we might look bad.
Yes.
We might look bad. We might, and that there's all types of thoughts and feelings that come along with that. Yep. We failed, but what we do as human beings, and this is part of the ontological coaching part that I was talking about, we fail at something and we make it mean something about us personally as an individual. Another saying that I've heard out there, it's not mine, so it's somebody else's that I've heard, is that humans are meaning-making machines. Like we go around making up stuff about who we are and who we're not, and what things mean when they happen all day, every single day. So when we fail at something, we make it mean that we are a failure. Or we lose and we make it mean that we are a loser, and those things bring on feelings of embarrassment and, guilt and shame and all types of stuff that can really be damaging if we don't figure out how to be able to be with it or process those things through. And that's happening all day long on the job site, or inside of the company. And I think a good leader needs to really start understanding that and work with people to work through those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that statement. And I grabbed my phone here because I was trying to dig up this quote that I love. I'm a big guy for Stoicism. I love the Stoic philosophy.
Oh, nice.
And one of my favorite philosophers was Epictetus, because he was like the only Stoic that was a little bit sarcastic, and that was funny back in the day. But one of my favorite quotes, I think I just posted it on LinkedIn not long ago, was, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid with regard to external things. Don't wish to be thought to know anything, and even if you appear to be somebody important to others, distrust yourself." And I couldn't say it better myself. And I mean, this was how long ago that thought process was heralded.
Totally. And, we're all, you mentioned Brene Brown, you're talking about Stoic philosophers and stuff like that. All of this stuff is just, the whole self-help industry is just a regurgitation of really old stuff, like I love tracing philosophy all the way back. It's brilliant, and I feel like it's so much more simpler than we tend to make it today. That's why I love the work that I do, man. It's really simple. It's not easy much of the time, but it's really, really simple. Like you think about, they say that public speaking is, people are more scared of public speaking than they are of death itself. And it's because of that quote that you just read.
Yeah.
There's this unwillingness to make a mistake, to look bad, and to feel all those feelings that come along with it. When you think about it, that's really, really simple. Like, I am just avoiding doing this thing because I think it's hard, or I think I might do it wrong, or I think somebody might feel some type of way about me or think some type of way about me. That's so simple, but it's not easy to work through those things.
Yeah, not at all. And you're absolutely right about that. And I think, this is a perfect way to kind of tie it back into the trades a little bit, because I remember when I was first learning my trade, restaurant equipment, how to fix restaurant equipment, using pipe wrenches, you would think that every single one of my fingers was a thumb. I mean, I was just, and that's just it, and you have to be willing to look bad. You have to be willing to, to put yourself out there, right? If you're looking to improve. And I think, and that could be another part of the situation that we're seeing right now with kids being, deterred a little bit from the trades. We live in a very, very online world, where social media is everything, which also means that likes are everything and status is everything. Yes. And it's very easy for somebody to post all the good things they do and none of the bad things they do. So, not only leadership, because leadership's on this pedestal too, right? I love what you said about everyone being a leader. I'm a big advocate of that. I have another personal blog called Leader Unknown that basically is that same premise. But status is also on this pedestal too, and so it creates this feeling, right, that you can't do anything to make you look bad. You can't do anything that people, aren't going to want to see or aren't going to want to see from you. And oh man, it's just backwards, and especially in the trades, if you want a career in the trades, you've got to be bad at it first. You do. And that's just the bottom line. And the same goes for anything else in life, Yeah.
And I think good leaders in the trades are going to let the younger folks know, the newer generations know, that it's okay to be bad at stuff first. They're not gonna come down on the people who are just getting started for, having 5 thumbs on each hand, right? They're gonna make that okay, and they're gonna make allowance for that. And oh man, you're so right that that the status thing, and I don't know this to be true, but it seems like it might be keeping people out of the trades, keeping the younger generations out of the trades, because there's so much hype about college and that being the right path to take and the right thing to do. And, there's a level of prestige around certain professions, like, being a doctor or a lawyer or, at the highest levels of finance or whatever it is, right? And that there's something lower or uncool about being in the trades. And I think that's BS. Like there are so many amazing opportunities in the blue collar world, opportunities to grow and develop as a person, as a leader, and as a business person, a professional. There's a lot of money to be made. There's great opportunity there, but I think there's a perception that it's like lower work or, for people who aren't smart enough to go to school or something.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I touch a lot on that in my book. And, it's amazing to me because I do a lot of these podcasts. I talk to a lot of people, basically around the globe in the blue collar world, and sometimes on the podcast, sometimes off the podcast, but everybody says just about the same thing about the most rewarding part of what they do, or at least one of the most rewarding parts of what they do is the ability to help people. And about 80% of those people, about 20, let's say 75%. So about 25%, it's the ability to help the customer, right? And the other 75% are talking about not only helping the customer, but helping the person next to them, helping the next generation. And at heart, they're teachers, and they want to pass on what they know because they know how valuable it is, and they take a lot of pride in what they do. And I think that's a trait also of a good leader. And it just goes to show the number of leaders that may not even know that they're leaders in the blue collar world.
Absolutely. Oh, and I'm really glad that you said that, Josh, because I'm really happy about that. That you see that number of people that are really interested in making a difference. And I want to be clear about something too. Like, the thing that I said about the culture that I see on a sort of in a generally speaking, I don't take anything away from what I said, but I want to be clear about we're not looking for people who are bad leaders to turn them into good leaders. We're actually looking for those people that you just described, the people who really are intentional about making that difference and, passing on the knowledge that they have to the next generations and helping people grow and excel. That's the person that we want to be working with. We want to create partnerships with people. It's like, that they have like this positive fire burning, so to speak, and we want to help them throw gasoline on that fire so that it grows and expands and touches people in a more impactful and positive way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, and it goes back to what I said before, right? These kind of tie in two things that I said and that you said together. Everyone's a leader, but I think that leadership in itself, without the proper training, without somebody opening somebody's eyes to the fact that everyone is a leader in some way, shape, or form, it is on this pedestal, right? Yeah. People think that leadership means leading 1,000-man army over a cliff into battle and asking them to lay down their life for you, when that's not it. That's what we see depicted on TV, and in the media and stuff like that, so that's what everyone's idea of a leader is. So these guys and these men and women that could be fantastic leaders look at themselves, and they say, well, I'm not a leader. because, you know, I could never lead 1,000-man army into battle. That's their benchmark. When it's, I mean, the opposite is true. You know, is if you influence one person, you know, to do the right thing, then you're a leader.
Absolutely. You know, it's the person who comes to work every day with the intention of doing their best is a leader. You know, somebody who's like, it's the player who comes out to leave everything on the field. You know, they're not necessarily coming out to win every game or to, you know, be the best or to look the best or anything like that. They're just coming to give their best and to be of service. That to me is leadership. Another thing that I would say is that there is no there to get to, right? Like there is, to me, leadership is a lifelong practice and a lifelong journey. You know, we never reach the end point as leaders, you know, so there's no set of principles that we need to learn and start practicing, and then all of a sudden we're a leader. You know, all of us, every single one of us have leadership development opportunities probably every single day. You know, I love seeing all those books that you have on your shelf. You know, you're somebody who is looking to fill yourself with knowledge and to not pretend that you know everything. And I think that's leadership. You know, there's an immense opportunity out there for all of us.
Yeah. Well, let's get one thing clear. I do know everything.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. No, but you're absolutely right. There is no stopping point, you know, and I think, and I'll ask you this question once we're done talking in a few minutes, but, you know, one thing I ask everybody is, you know, how they define success. And, you know, that's always been part of my definition of success, is to continually learn and to never be satisfied with where I am, you know, with regards to leadership and performance and, you know, personal development and stuff like that. If I can continually work on that kind of stuff until the day that I die, you know, that's where I consider myself a success. And I think leadership for people is a very vital part of that, because it is something that needs to be practiced. It is something that needs to be recognized, and it's a big portion, even if people don't know it, which I'm glad that there's people like you out there telling people that they should know it and showing them how to see it, you know, but that's a big part of, you know, being able to be successful, at least for me. You know, everybody has their own definition of success, and I completely respect that, you know, but I think that, you know, if more people understood exactly how to define leadership, more people would incorporate that into their idea of success.
Absolutely. I would 100% think so. And I think the world would be made a better place for it. Yeah. You know, it's also like a muscle, right? If we're not feeding, if we're not, you know, you're not at the gym doing reps, then your muscle is going to atrophy, right? And it's the same thing with leadership too. If we're not feeding that, we're not feeding it with knowledge and inspiration and different perspectives and ideas, then it's going to atrophy too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's important to understand. The mind is muscle, and it needs to be worked. And that's a big part of personal and professional development. You know, you continually have to put in those reps in order to strengthen it, in order to improve it, you know, and you know, so you could be considered a personal trainer in that sense, right? You're the person that comes in and helps people work that muscle, you know, and sometimes that's what it takes, man. I mean, that's just truth be told. Sometimes that's what it takes.
Absolutely.
So before I ask you my final question, is there anything else that you wanted to add today? We got to wrap it up because I know I could talk to you forever.
Man, you know, I could probably talk about this forever too. So I think the only thing that I would add is get on the path. You know, like for all the people who are listening to this, again, I want to reiterate that hiring a coach or somebody like me is not It's not because there's a problem to fix. It's not because there's anything wrong. It's because of what we just said. It's an opportunity to grow and develop. And in my humble opinion, it's a journey that lasts a lifetime. To your point, Josh, right? I think we should always be growing and always be learning. So I just want to make that clear, I guess, as my final statement.
Absolutely. So then my final question to you, Mick, is how do you define success?
Oh, man. I really define success as happiness and being willing to fail as many times as it takes to get there.
Good answer. Real good answer. Mick, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Thanks, Josh. Again, my name is Mick Carbo, and the website is real simple and easy. It's carbocoaching.com, and that's carbo like carbohydrate without the hydrate. And find me on LinkedIn. It's my favorite social media platform to play around on, and you just look up Mick Carbo on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure you're not going to find any other Mick Carbos out there, but I might be wrong about that. But definitely hook up on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Mick, thank you so much for lending me your valuable time today. I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to me.
Thanks so much, Josh. It was really an honor and a pleasure. I appreciate you, man.
All right. Keep doing what you do, brother.